He never believed love could come from an arranged marriage. But the moment he saw her eyes behind that simple veil, the billionaire forgot every rule he had written. Millionaire agreed to marry a plain woman for duty, but her hidden truth left him speechless. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy emotional love stories that mix drama and redemption, please make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and tell me where you are watching from in the comments. It truly helps this channel grow and keeps the stories coming. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain poured over Manhattan like liquid glass, blurring the skyline outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Cole Group Tower. Inside, the boardroom smelled of leather, ink, and tension. Ethan Cole, 32, billionaire CEO, leaned over a folder stamped with the words, "Marital Contract." His jaw tightened. Across the polished table sat his mother's lawyer. "You know the condition, Mr. Cole. Without a legal marriage before the fiscal year ends, you lose voting control of the company." Ethan's voice was calm, but cold. "You mean my father's last manipulation?" The lawyer did not blink. "Your father trusted that marriage would teach you responsibility. He selected a candidate." Ethan looked up sharply. "A candidate?" The door opened. A woman stepped in, her posture straight despite the rain clinging to her plain gray dress. Lila Evans. She worked for the Cole Foundation, known for her quiet charity work, not her beauty or power. Her hair was pinned loosely, her makeup barely there. Ethan studied her, searching for the reason his late father would have chosen someone so ordinary. But there was something steady in her eyes, something unshaken by the room's wealth. His voice broke the silence. "So, Miss Evans, you understand the terms? This is a marriage on paper. 6 months, mutual benefit, no expectations beyond appearances." Lila folded her hands. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Cole. I am not here for your money. I am here because the Cole Foundation funds Harmony House, and without this arrangement, that shelter will close within weeks. The women there deserve better." Ethan almost smiled, a flicker of irony at her courage. "You are trading vows for charity?" She met his gaze. "And you are trading love for control. We both have our reasons." For a moment, the thunder outside filled the silence between them. Ethan closed the folder and reached for his pen. "Then let us call it what it is, business." He signed first. She followed, her signature small but firm. As the pen left the paper, a faint tremor passed through Ethan's hand, something unfamiliar, maybe guilt, maybe curiosity. He pushed the document toward the lawyer. "Prepare the ceremony." When the door closed behind them, Lila stayed still, her eyes fixed on the rain sliding down the window. Ethan turned away, already convincing himself it meant nothing. Yet, when she spoke again, her tone carried a quiet conviction that unsettled him. "Mr. Cole, I do not care what the world sees. But when you look at me, at least see a person, not a contract." For the first time in years, Ethan had no reply. He only watched her walk out, the soft echo of her steps lingering long after the thunder faded. Outside, New York kept rushing horns, rain, and the endless hum of ambition, while inside that glass tower, a billionaire who thought he could buy control had just signed the one deal that would test his heart. The rain eased by morning, leaving Manhattan washed in silver light. Ethan Cole had not slept. He sat in his penthouse office, staring at the skyline that once gave him pride. The marriage license lay on the desk beside a half-empty glass of bourbon. His reflection in the window looked older than 32, not from age, but from the weight of choices that had never felt like his own. His assistant, Mark, entered quietly. "Sir, the ceremony is scheduled for noon at the courthouse. Do you want a press release prepared?" Ethan's tone was dry. "No publicity, no fairy tales. It is a contract, not a celebration." By noon, the courthouse hall smelled faintly of rain and old marble. Lila Evans stood by the window, her gray dress replaced by a simple ivory suit. No lace, no bouquet, only dignity. She held nothing but a folded letter in her hand. When Ethan arrived, his tailored black suit made him look every inch the man of control. Yet when their eyes met, something in his chest shifted. There was no fear in her gaze, no hesitation. Just calm acceptance, as if she had made peace with a storm long before meeting him. The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Ethan Cole and Miss Lila Evans, you are here to enter into a legal union." The vows were short. No rings, no family, no witnesses except the lawyer and the echo of rain outside. When the judge pronounced them married, Ethan exhaled softly, as if sealing a deal rather than beginning a life. As they walked out, Lila paused on the courthouse steps. Reporters waited behind the barricade, cameras flashing. Ethan's body stiffened, but before he could react, she smiled faintly and whispered, "Let me handle this." She stepped forward, facing the cameras with grace. "Today was not about glamour or gossip," she said calmly. "It was about two people honoring a promise. Sometimes duty is another word for responsibility." Her voice carried through the drizzle, steady and warm. Even the reporters hesitated before shouting the next question. Ethan watched her, silent, realizing she had turned a transaction into something dignified. Back in the car, he spoke quietly. "You did not have to say anything." "I know," she replied, looking out the window. "But silence lets others write your story. I prefer to write my own." The city blurred by traffic, umbrellas, streetlights reflecting off wet asphalt. Ethan leaned back, studying her reflection in the glass. There was something about her composure that unsettled him. He was used to power, but she carried peace, and it made him uneasy. That evening, they arrived at the Cole mansion in Long Island. The house was vast, more museum than home. Staff lined the hallways, greeting the couple with polite formality. Lila thanked each person by name, which startled Ethan. He had not known she remembered them from her volunteer work with his mother's foundation. At dinner, the silence between them stretched. Silver cutlery glinted beneath the chandelier. Ethan finally spoke. "You can stay in the East Wing. It will give you privacy. We will only appear together when necessary." Lila nodded once. "Understood. I did not expect more." She stood, ready to leave, but paused by the door. "Mr. Cole, I know you think this is just an arrangement. I thought the same. But perhaps, while we pretend, we can at least be kind." Her words lingered after she left the room. Ethan sat alone, the echo of rain against the windows returning like a quiet heartbeat. He looked down at the untouched meal, then at the empty chair across from him. For the first time in years, the mansion felt enormous, and he realized wealth could fill space, but not silence. That night, in the East Wing, Lila unfolded the letter she had carried all day. It was a note from the women of Harmony House. "For the girl who gives others a home, may she find one too." She smiled softly, unaware that across the hall, the billionaire she had just married was staring into the darkness, wondering when duty had begun to feel like loneliness. The first week of marriage passed like a series of rehearsed gestures. Ethan Cole and Lila Evans appeared together at 2 charity events, smiled for cameras, and returned home as strangers under the same roof. Every evening, the staff arranged dinner for 2, but most nights ended with untouched plates and unspoken words. One morning, Ethan walked into his office to find a slim folder on his desk. It was marked Public, Schedule Mrs. Lila Cole. His brows furrowed. The name still felt foreign. Inside were notes written in her careful handwriting. Upcoming foundation visits, potential media questions, and one line at the bottom, "Attend only if you believe in it." He read it twice. Surprised by her tone, there was no demand, no pretense, just honesty. He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair, staring out at the city skyline. Something about that quiet confidence unsettled him. Later that day, he entered the main hall and found Lila, speaking with Mrs. Gray, the elderly housekeeper. Lila was helping her carry a stack of linens, laughing softly. Ethan stopped at the doorway, unnoticed. For years, he had walked these halls, surrounded by silence. Now, for the first time, it sounded like home. At dinner that evening, he cleared his throat. "The board wants us to attend the annual gala next week. It will be our first major appearance as a married couple." Lila nodded, calm as always. "Then I will be ready. Do you want me to prepare a statement?" "No," he said, hesitating. Just be yourself. It seems to work better than anything else. Her lips curved in a faint smile. That might be the first compliment you have given me. He looked away, pretending to focus on his glass. Do not let it go to your head. Their uneasy truce carried them through the week. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of spectacle only Manhattan could create: crystal chandeliers, champagne, and 1,000 eyes waiting for something to judge. Ethan stood near the entrance in a black tuxedo, his expression composed. When Lila entered, every conversation in the hall paused for a heartbeat. Her gown was simple but elegant, navy silk that caught the light like water. She had pinned her hair up, revealing the calm strength in her face. Ethan felt an unexpected rush of pride, then immediately buried it. They walked together toward the cameras. Reporters shouted, "Questions. Mr. Cole, how does it feel to be a married man? Mrs. Cole, do you believe this union is real or strategic?" Before Ethan could respond, Lila turned to the nearest microphone. "Marriage is a partnership," she said evenly. "It may begin for different reasons, but it only survives on respect." The room quieted. Even the flash of cameras slowed. Ethan glanced at her, astonished by the poise in her voice. When the music resumed, he leaned closer and whispered, "You were not supposed to outshine the shareholders," she whispered back. "Then you should not have invited me." Hours later, as they left the gala, rain began to fall again. Their driver opened an umbrella, but Lila lifted her face toward the drizzle, smiling. "You know, rain makes people honest. It washes everything fake away." Ethan looked at her, wondering what else the rain might reveal. Back at the mansion, he stopped her before she entered her room. "Lila, the board was impressed tonight. Thank you." She turned, her voice soft. "You do not need to thank me, Ethan. Just remember what respect feels like. It may be the only thing real between us." He nodded slightly, unsure why her words hit deeper than any deal he had ever made. Long after she disappeared into her room, Ethan stood in the hallway, listening to the faint hum of rain against the windows. For the first time, he realized that the woman his father had chosen for him was not ordinary at all, and the contract that once felt like a prison was slowly becoming something far more dangerous, something that felt like the beginning of truth. A week after the gala, the city was buzzing with articles calling Lila Cole the quiet surprise of Manhattan society. Ethan's assistant, Mark, placed a stack of magazines on his desk, each with her photograph on the cover. She was smiling in every shot, graceful, calm, untouchable. "She handled the media better than your entire public relations team," Mark said, half amused. Ethan ignored the comment, but as he flipped through the pages, he could not deny it. The woman he had married for convenience was now changing how people saw him. Investors who had doubted his leadership were calling again. The boardroom that once felt like a battlefield had fallen silent in approval. Later that evening, Ethan walked past the library and stopped when he heard a soft piano melody. Lila sat by the grand piano, her fingers moving lightly across the keys. The music was simple, but filled the empty house like sunlight. He stood at the doorway. "I did not know you played." She looked up, startled, but smiled faintly. "I learned at Harmony House. The piano there was always out of tune, but the children never noticed." Ethan walked closer, his voice lower. "You were not afraid to stand in front of 1,000 people at the gala, but you still apologize for playing in your own home." She paused, her hands still on the keys. "Old habits. When you grow up unseen, you learn not to take up space." Her words lingered. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. "You are not unseen anymore," he said quietly. Their eyes met, and for a brief second, the space between them shifted from duty to something softer, almost dangerous. But Lila broke the gaze first, standing abruptly. "It is late. Good night, Mr. Cole." That night, Ethan dreamed of her voice over the music. When he woke, the sound of rain was back, steady against the glass. He went downstairs and found her already in the kitchen, hair tied back, barefoot, pouring coffee. The sight caught him off guard. "You make your own coffee?" he asked, almost teasing. She handed him a cup. "The staff are people, not servants. They deserve a morning off." He accepted the cup, his fingers brushing hers. "You are going to ruin my reputation for being heartless." She laughed softly. "Maybe it is time someone did." In the following days, their routine began to change. They ate breakfast together, shared quiet car rides, exchanged small talk that turned into laughter. But for every moment of warmth, Ethan felt the weight of the contract in his pocket. 6 months. That was the rule, and he could not afford to forget it. One afternoon, he found her in his office, studying a file on his desk. It was a project proposal for low-income housing. "You want to rebuild Harmony House?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, I think your company has the resources to make it sustainable. You could turn a tax write-off into something real." Ethan studied her face. "You talk about charity like it is strategy." She met his gaze. "Because for people like me, it has to be. Good intentions are not enough. Structure makes kindness last." He said nothing, only watched her gather the papers and leave. When she was gone, he opened the folder again, reading her notes line by line. Every calculation was exact, every idea practical. It was not just compassion, it was brilliance. That night, as he walked through the quiet halls, he saw the framed contract on his office wall, the one that had started it all. It looked smaller now, like a piece of paper trying to contain something that had already outgrown it. In the East Wing, Lila wrote in her journal before bed. Her pen paused over one line. "He is changing, or maybe I am the one who is finally seeing him." Neither of them knew it yet, but the arrangement that began as duty was already becoming the one thing both of them had spent their lives avoiding the truth of their own hearts. Autumn arrived with a cool wind sweeping through Long Island, and the mansion that once felt like a museum began to show signs of life. The staff smiled more. The gardens were tended again, and in the mornings, laughter sometimes drifted from the kitchen where Ethan and Lila shared coffee before work. To the outside world, their marriage looked perfect. To the board, it was proof that Ethan Cole had matured, steadied, and regained the company's confidence. But inside, the line between arrangement and emotion grew thinner with each passing day. One Friday, Lila knocked on the door of Ethan's office. He was buried in numbers, a frown cutting across his face. She placed a cup of black coffee on his desk. "You missed lunch again," she said softly. He looked up. "I did not notice." "That is the problem," she replied, smiling faintly. "You notice everything except yourself." He watched her turn toward the window, sunlight tracing the edge of her hair. "Lila," he said slowly, "when this is over, what will you do?" She hesitated. "Harmony House will be rebuilt. That is all I planned for. And after that?" She looked down. "I have never thought beyond surviving, Ethan. I do not know how to plan for peace." The room went quiet. Then he said, almost to himself, "Maybe peace is something we build, not something we find." That night, the Cole Group hosted a charity dinner for investors and the foundation board. The ballroom shimmered with golden light. Ethan stood at the center, greeting guests, but his eyes kept drifting to Lila across the room. She was radiant in a simple emerald dress, laughing with one of the donors. Victor, his cousin and the company's vice president, leaned close and muttered, "You are playing the part too well, Ethan. People might believe you actually care." Ethan's expression hardened. "Maybe caring is not as dangerous as you think," Victor smirked. "We will see how long that lasts once the contract ends." The dinner went smoothly until a journalist, emboldened by champagne, raised his glass and said loudly, "Mr. Cole, rumor has it your marriage is just a business deal. Care to comment?" The crowd stilled. Lila's eyes met Ethan's across the table. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then Ethan stood, his tone measured, but firm. "My father once told me that family is the only legacy that matters. I did not believe him until I met my wife. So yes, maybe it began as business. But what I found was something far more valuable: integrity." The journalist lowered his glass. The room erupted in polite applause, and Lila exhaled, tension melting from her shoulders. Later, as they left the ballroom, she said quietly, "You did not have to defend me." He looked at her. "I was not defending you, Lila. I was telling the truth. That night, they returned home in silence, the hum of the city fading behind them. At the door of her room, Lila turned to speak, but Ethan stopped her with a whisper. Lila, do you ever wish this was real? She froze, her heart pounding. Do you? He hesitated. Every day. For a long moment, neither moved. The air between them felt fragile, full of everything they had not said. Then Lila stepped back, her voice barely a breath. Do not say things you cannot keep. She closed the door gently. Ethan stood alone in the hallway, his pulse echoing like footsteps in the dark. Across the house, Lila leaned against her door, tears threatening to fall. The contract still hung in her mind like a wall between them. She whispered to herself, this was never supposed to matter. But the truth had already taken root. And as autumn deepened, both of them began to realize that the most dangerous thing about pretending was how real it had started to feel. Winter arrived quietly, covering Long Island in a soft layer of snow. Inside the Cole mansion, the air was warm, but something unspoken lingered between Ethan and Lila. The night of the charity dinner had changed everything. Since then, they moved carefully around each other, as if one wrong word could break the fragile balance they had built. One evening, Ethan returned home late from the office. The house was quiet except for faint music coming from the east wing. He followed the sound and found Lila sitting by the fireplace, sketching on a small pad of paper. She looked peaceful, lost in thought. I did not know you, Drew, he said softly. Lila looked up, startled, but smiled. It is nothing serious. Just a habit from when I could not afford anything else to do. He stepped closer. May I see? She hesitated, then handed him the sketchbook. Inside were delicate pencil drawings, portraits of the staff, the garden, even a rough outline of the mansion. But one sketch caught his eye. It was of him, standing at his office window, looking out over the city. He looked at her, surprised. When did you draw this? She shrugged. A few weeks ago. You looked distant. I wanted to capture that. He studied the drawing again. You see too much, Lila. And you see too little, she replied gently. He smiled, the faintest hint of warmth returning to his face. Maybe that is why we balance each other. For the first time in weeks, they both laughed quietly. The sound was soft, but it felt real. Days later, they attended a board meeting together. Lila sat beside him, calm and composed. During the presentation, she noticed Ethan rubbing his wrist. After the meeting, she asked, Are you all right? It is nothing, he said. Just an old injury from years ago. She reached out without thinking and placed her hand over his. You do not have to pretend all the time. The room went silent. For a moment, he simply looked at her, and the tension that had haunted him for years began to loosen. That night, snow fell harder. Ethan could not sleep. He walked to the east wing, hesitated outside her door, and finally knocked. Lila opened it, wrapped in a wool robe, eyes wide with surprise. Ethan? Is something wrong? He shook his head. I just needed to talk. They sat by the window, watching the snow pile against the glass. Ethan spoke quietly, his voice lower than usual. My father believed love made people weak. I built my life proving him wrong, but I think I became exactly what he wanted, a man afraid to feel. Lila listened, her gaze steady. Maybe your father was wrong. Maybe love is the only thing that makes people strong enough to stay. Ethan turned toward her, the distance between them disappearing. You make everything sound so simple. It is simple, she said softly. It is just not easy. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them was filled with the hum of the storm outside. Then Ethan reached for her hand. She did not pull away. They stayed like that until the fire burned low, two people who had begun as a contract but were now caught in something far beyond negotiation. When morning came, the first light of dawn slipped through the window. Lila was already awake, watching the snow melt into gold. She whispered to herself, Duty brought him to me, but kindness is what keeps him here. Across the hall, Ethan stood at his window, holding the sketch she had drawn of him. For the first time, he realized the man in that picture was not lonely anymore. The contract still existed, but his heart no longer belonged to it. The snow had barely melted when the first crack appeared in their fragile peace. It came with a headline: "The Truth About Ethan Cole's Contract Marriage." By the time Ethan reached the office, every screen in the building displayed the same article. Someone had leaked a copy of their marriage contract to the press. The document was real, signed, dated, and stamped with his signature. His assistant, Mark, looked pale. "Sir, the leak came from inside the company. The press already knows the marriage expires next month." Ethan's stomach tightened. Find out who did it. Within hours, the damage spread. Investors called non-stop. Social media exploded with photographs from the wedding, the gala, every public event they had attended together. Commentators labeled Lila a gold digger. Others mocked her for being the plain charity girl who fooled a billionaire. At the mansion, Lila sat in silence, the newspaper trembling in her hands. When Ethan arrived, she did not look up. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "Yes, but I did not." She stood, tears burning in her eyes. "You did not stop it either. You could have told me this was coming. You could have trusted me." "Lila, please," he said, taking a step closer. "Someone set this up. They want to destroy us." "There is no us, Ethan. There never was. It was a contract, remember?" Her voice cracked, but her composure stayed. She placed her wedding ring on the table. "I will not stay and be your scandal." Before he could answer, she was gone. That night, the house felt hollow. The staff moved quietly, unsure whether to speak his name. Ethan sat in his office, staring at the broken frame of their wedding photo. The leak had come from Victor. He knew it before the report confirmed it. His cousin had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Victor's message arrived the next morning. "You built an empire on appearances. Let us see how you manage without one." Ethan's reply was silence. He closed his phone and walked toward the window. The city below looked smaller than ever. Meanwhile, Lila returned to Harmony House. Reporters followed her for days, but she refused to answer their questions. Inside the shelter, she focused on the children, rebuilding the broken piano, keeping her mind steady. Yet every night, she thought of him, the man who had defended her, the man who had lost her. Ethan stood alone in his mansion, the sound of her laughter echoing in memory. For the first time, he understood what it meant to have everything and nothing at the same time. And somewhere between guilt and longing, a decision began to form, one that would cost him everything he had left, except the truth. A week passed before Ethan Cole appeared in public again. When he did, the world was waiting. The Cole Group's annual review meeting filled the auditorium with journalists, investors, and every member of the board. Cameras flashed as he walked onto the stage, dressed in a simple gray suit instead of his usual tailored black. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The rumor was that he would resign. Instead, Ethan placed a folder on the podium and spoke in a steady voice. "I know what you have read. I know what you believe. But today, you deserve the truth." He pressed a button, and a screen behind him lit up with a presentation not about profits, but about Harmony House. Photographs of the shelter's reconstruction appeared, followed by the financial records that proved it had been funded quietly through his personal account. Ethan looked up at the audience. "You think my wife married me for money, but it was her plan, her design, and her persistence that rebuilt this place. The Cole Foundation did not save Harmony House. Lila Evans did." The crowd went silent. "She asked for nothing in return," he continued, his voice shaking slightly. "And when the truth came out, she walked away to protect the very people who needed her. I signed that contract for control, but she turned it into compassion. She is the only reason this company still stands for something." At the back of the room, Lila froze. She had not planned to come, but one of the staff had begged her to see the broadcast in person. She stood hidden in the last row, her heart pounding as Ethan's words filled the hall. He closed the folder. "If my leadership requires deception, then I do not deserve this position. But if integrity means admitting when someone else is better, then today, I choose integrity." Ethan stepped down from the stage. Cameras flashed wildly as he walked through the crowd. When he reached the exit, he saw her. For a moment, neither moved. The world seemed too intentionous. vanish behind them. He stopped, his voice quiet. You once asked me to see a person, not a contract. I see you now, Lila, and I am sorry it took losing everything to understand what I had. She looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. You did not lose everything, Ethan. You just found what matters. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the torn corner of their marriage contract, folded neatly. The board called this the end of an arrangement. I call it the beginning of a promise. Lila took the paper from his hand, her fingers trembling. The cameras caught the moment, but for once, Ethan did not care. The applause that followed was not for a CEO reclaiming power. It was for a man who had finally learned how to tell the truth. Spring returned to New York with soft sunlight breaking through the skyline. 3 months had passed since the board meeting, and the story that once shook the business world had slowly faded into something else: respect. Ethan Cole had stepped down as CEO, but his company thrived under a new leadership model he had designed with Lila's help. The Cole Foundation and Harmony House now worked as partners, rebuilding shelters across the city. On a Saturday morning, Lila stood inside the renovated Harmony House. The air smelled of paint and fresh flowers. Children's laughter echoed through the hall as volunteers unpacked supplies. At the center of the main room hung a framed sketch, one of her drawings of Ethan, standing by his office window. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, "Duty began it. Choice made it. Love." Ethan arrived quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. He watched her give instructions to the volunteers, her presence calm and certain. When she turned and saw him, her face lit up with the same warmth he had once mistaken for patience. "You are early," she said with a smile. "I did not want to miss the opening," he replied, handing her a cup. "Besides, I promised to help with the heavy boxes." She laughed softly. "You and heavy boxes do not mix, Ethan." He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Maybe not, but you make everything lighter." They stood together, watching the sunlight pour through the tall windows. The piano she had repaired months earlier was now restored and shining. Ethan nodded toward it. "Play something," he said, "for old times." She sat and began a quiet melody, the same one she used to play alone in the mansion. Ethan listened, feeling the weight of years lift from his chest. When the song ended, he reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the piano, a small velvet box. "Before, I asked you to marry me for duty," he said softly. "Now, I am asking because I cannot imagine my life without you." Lila's eyes filled with tears as she opened the box. Inside was not a diamond, but a simple silver band engraved with a single word: truth. She whispered, "You always did know how to surprise me." He took her hand. "Then let me surprise you again. Marry me, Lila. No contracts, no conditions. Just choice." She nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes." Applause erupted from the volunteers who had gathered nearby, smiling through happy tears. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and for a moment, the world outside the old shelter felt impossibly far away. As they stood together, the piano gleamed in the sunlight, the melody of a new beginning echoing through the room. Ethan looked at her and said, "We built this from duty, but it became something real." Lila smiled, her eyes bright with love. "It became home."